Welcome to the Hostess City, where the cocktails are chilling, the dinners spirited, and the accommodations may just entice you to stay forever. So, are you a supernaturally curious travel enthusiast? Well, then you've come to the right place, because I am the ghost tourist, and this is Savannah, Georgia.
Where in the world are you hiding, my dear, my dear? I caught a glimpse of something very weird. A ghost, I fear, is near me, dear. A ghost has slipped into my world, my world.
Okay, check out this bird's eye view of Savannah. We're just about to land. It's my first time in Savannah, and I am blown away. I'm just totally in awe of the haunting beauty of this place. I think I've landed in ghost tour heaven. Savannah has a prolific amount of ghostly tales, and many claim that's because the city has quite literally been built upon the dead. For centuries, as Savannah expanded, they simply covered over thousands of fallen soldiers, native peoples, slaves, and epidemic victims. This is the Colonial Park Cemetery. It's one of the oldest intact cemeteries in the entire state, and these moss-covered trees have borne witness to some seriously strange occurrences. Midnight hoodoo rituals, mass graves, duels to the death, headstones desecrated, and skeletons misplaced. Established in 1750 and closed to burials in 1853, an estimated 12,000 people are buried in this cemetery, but there are only about 600 headstones. Some say there are so few grave markers because the Union Army camped here in the winter of 1864 and used the headstones for target practice. But the city is also responsible. For example, in true Savannah fashion, when Abercorn Street was built along its border, the unmoved graves were merely paved over. Come here at night, and you're almost guaranteed to see one of the city's dozen or so ghost tours, clad in eccentric attire and telling spooky tales. Okay, so we didn't end up with a tour guide with a cape, but this is Min Nguyen of Savannah Terrors, and he is awesome. I'll let him tell you a bit more about the cemetery.
There are definitely a lot of mass graves here. So the most famous one is from the 1820 yellow fever epidemic. And in the first year of the epidemic, about 700 people succumbed to the disease and were buried in a mass grave in Colonial Park Cemetery. Now, the plaque on that mass grave says, about or almost 700 people buried here. It is rumored that the actual number of people who are buried in that mass grave is 666.
Ooh. They equipped us with an EMF meter, so we're looking for that red light to blink. Most of the time, the spikes come from man-made sources, like if you're standing too close to a power line. But a lot of paranormal investigators do believe that ghosts can manipulate or emit electromagnetic fields. This gate was erected in 1913 by the Daughters of the American Revolution. The cemetery is now locked at night, but Min says they still get a lot of stories of people witnessing specters and shadows in the night.
I've had a lot of stories from friends who were tour guides. Maybe the ghosts either really like me or really don't like me. But I've not really felt anything other than like strangely at peace.
If you're lucky, or perhaps unlucky, you may even catch a glimpse of one of the cemetery's most notorious phantoms, Rene Rondelier. Born in 1777, he was reportedly 7 feet 5 inches tall, and his disfigured body was covered in a thick mass of animal-like hair. He likely suffered from mental illness, as they say he tortured so many animals that his parents had to build an 8-foot-high brick wall to keep him penned into the backyard. But one day, he escaped and murdered 2 small girls, then ran and hid within the catacombs of the cemetery. But he was caught and lynched, not soon after, by an angry mob. After his death, 2 more children and a woman were found murdered in the cemetery, and the neighbors feared it was Rondelier, risen from the dead. They say he still stalks the catacombs at night, and his ghostly apparition is quite easy to identify, being over 7 feet tall. In fact, there is no Rondelier tomb in the cemetery. Perhaps the body's in an unmarked grave, but more than likely, the story is an urban legend, made popular in the 19th century by all those Mary Shelley fans. Everywhere you turn, there's a tour guide. Frequently named the most haunted city in America, Savannah's recorded history begins in 1733 when James Oglethorpe sailed up the Savannah River with 120 passengers aboard the good ship Anne. Oglethorpe pledged mutual goodwill with the local Yamacraw chief and was granted permission to settle Savannah. He named America's 13th and final colony, Georgia, after the King of England. I can't believe the weekend I come to Savannah, there's ice! This is crazy. That's a statue of Oglethorpe there. Weirdly, not in Oglethorpe Square, but Chippewa Square. So Savannah is known as America's first planned city, and it was laid out with wide lanes around 24 squares, 22 of which still exist today, and they're all incredibly beautiful. This square is home to the marker of Yamacraw chief Tomochichi, who allied with General Oglethorpe. When Tomochichi died in 1739 at the age of 95, Oglethorpe had him buried in the center of Wright Square under a pyramid of stones. But in 1883, the city plowed over the grave, scattered Tomochichi's bones, and plopped a towering monument to William Gordon on top. He was the builder of Georgia's first railroad. Thankfully, Gordon's daughter-in-law Nellie was rather horrified about this desecration, so in 1899 she organized this granite monument erected nearby. Legend states that if you walk around the perimeter 3 times and say the name of Tomochichi, he may just respond back to you. But this square also has a more sinister reputation. It was the colony's first hanging grounds, and it was here in 1735 that they hung Alice Riley, the colony's first murderess. Alice Riley was a young Irish indentured servant. She worked for William Wise, a local cattle rancher who by all accounts was as cruel as they come. Alice was his bedmaid, and she was very likely abused. Then one day, William was found dead, drowned face down in a bucket by his bedside. Alice and her accomplice, Richard White, another servant, attempted to run, but they were soon caught and convicted. However, Alice was found to be pregnant. So 9 months later, she gave birth one morning and was hanged by the afternoon. Her son, James, only survived her by a month. They say her angry spirit follows young mothers through the park, desperate to snatch their babies as her own. Some accounts claim they've encountered a red-haired woman begging for help to find her baby. The police have even received phone calls from these helpful strangers, who soon discover the distraught young woman has completely vanished. Hey, if you're enjoying the video, please remember to hit that subscribe button. Next is Madison Square in the heart of the historic district. This monument pays tribute to Savannah's Irish heritage. It depicts a soldier from the American Revolutionary War during the siege of Savannah in 1779. So we're here in Madison Square with my dear friend Brett Lambie, who is a casual military historian. Brett, what can you tell us about the history of Savannah during the Revolutionary War?
Well, during the Revolutionary War in 1778, the British captured Savannah. They would retain it until the end of the war in 1782. But in 1779, the American forces wanted to retake the city. And with the help of the French, they mounted a siege of Savannah. This was called the Second Battle of Savannah, and it was the second bloodiest battle of the entire Revolutionary War.
Imagine it's dawn on October 9th, 1779. You're emerging from a swamp, drenched. There's fog everywhere. Your unit is disoriented as you try to gain the high ground. Suddenly, the fog lifts, and you discover the British position is far heavier fortified than you were led to believe. Your lines are exposed. The battle only lasts an hour, and it's complete annihilation.
1,000 troops died that day from the American side, as opposed to about 150 from the British.
That's a big difference.
Big difference. The attack was so embarrassing that the French commander, a week later, would actually retreat back to France, sailed his way home.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Madison Square sits on the former site of this battlefield, a land that was once drenched in blood. Dead soldiers were thrown in pits, though in the heat of battle, it was sometimes hard to differentiate between the injured, and they too were buried alive. After the battle, the bodies were never exhumed, and as the city expanded, Madison Square and its surrounding homes, like this one, were built directly over the remains. Ghostly soldiers and dark shadows have been spotted in the basement, but that's just the beginning of this home's very haunted history. This is the Sorrel Weed House, a national landmark and huge tourist attraction due to its ghoulish reputation. I will say upon first glance, there's something just very unwelcoming about this place. It's a well-known haunted house, as you can see. Lots of ghost hunters have conducted investigations. Tons of people have filmed here, and oh, did you see that? That was like there's a weird shadow or reflection upstairs. Oh, well, we're taking one of their nightly house tours, so oh boy, wish us luck. Are you scared yet? So last night, I asked our tour guide Min about this house, and here's what he had to say.
The Sorrel Weed House
Yeah.
is one place that gives me the heebie-jeebies.
Yeah.
I have a friend who used to be a tour guide in that house, and she refuses to step foot back inside that building today.
Oh, the entire building.
Yeah.
Ah.
In her own words, she says the house is absolutely evil.
So great. The home was constructed in 1840 for Francis Sorrel, a wealthy shipping merchant who traded in sugar and African slaves. Francis was a successful man who married quite well. After his first wife died of yellow fever, he wed her younger sister Matilda for double the dowry. And with all that money, he built this house. Francis and Matilda were fond of one another. They had numerous children, but what they loved the most was parties. However, Matilda was prone to melancholia, and in modern day, it's believed she likely suffered from clinical depression. There is much speculation about her death, but the facts are these. On March 27th, 1860, they were preparing for a party. Matilda had been agitated the entire day, and suddenly she went up the stairs, out to the third-floor balcony, and jumped.
So, the balcony above us, Matilda would have locked herself at the top, jumped, and then landed head first into the corridor down below. Unfortunately, the impact broke her neck, cracked her skull wide open. However, she did not die on impact. And she would have passed away a few hours later in her bedroom.
The most popular legend is that Matilda discovered her husband in bed with a slave girl named Molly. Supposedly, only 1 week after Matilda's suicide, Molly was found hanging by a noose in her own room in the carriage house. Both women reportedly haunt the mansion to this day. However, it has been recently discovered that the carriage house was in fact built by the Weed family in 1870, which was 10 years after Matilda's suicide. So if Molly existed, we don't know her actual name, and she wouldn't have lived in the carriage house, but rather in the main house, perhaps in the attic or basement. This place is really eerie. Whoa, did you see that? Watch that again, brightened up and slowed down. Look at my ring light reflecting on the stairs. The shadow crosses in front of my light. So even though the details of the story are unclear, this house has an immense volume of paranormal activity. Numerous EVPs have been collected, dark shadows documented, and spirit orbs photographed. Some felt as if they were being grabbed or strangled. Blurry figures appear in mirrors and through glass. Objects are relocated, candlesticks thrown, and odd smells that are out of time, like cigars and perfume, or cauterized flesh. The basement was also used as a surgery by one of Francis's sons, Frank Sorrel.
So Frank, by all accounts, was considered to be a very successful and very well-educated surgeon. The man graduated from Princeton and the University of Pennsylvania, medical degrees. So I want you to imagine you're in an industrial accident above the river, run over by a carriage, you're bit by an alligator, shot in a duel, your arm is mangled and crushed. You wanted to see Frank.
Apparently, Frank was the guy to see for amputations, performing hundreds of them every year.
The scalpel goes through the skin, callus is going to go through the flesh, the muscle, saw is going to go through the bone. And once you get to that saw, you got to think of the serrated edge grinding back and forth on that bone until you're about halfway in and you stop. Halfway, you pull the saw out. Because what do you think is quicker than to keep sawing through the bone? Break it off, snap it off. What's now sticking out of the arm that's now splintered? It's the bone. You gotta get a big metal file down that bone until it's tightly packed into the muscle, grab a handful of sawdust, stick it in the arm, create a blockage, then get a big metal iron brand, put it to the muscle. Everybody hears the sizzling, everybody smells the burning flesh. Take the loose skin, wrap it on top of itself, suture it shut, stub is done, bring me the next patient.
And if you survived the table, it's likely infection would get you. Given these grisly circumstances, added to the fact that this was also slave quarters and built over the site of one of the bloodiest battlefields in the Revolutionary War, it's no surprise this basement is the most paranormally active spot in the entire house, and perhaps the entire city.
They'll tell me, oh yeah, it smells like blood in here. Oh, my limb is getting really numb. Oh, I'm getting dizzy. Their clothing gets tugged from side to side. The jewelry gets played with. I've had 2 women have their earrings ripped out of the ears in the middle of a tour. The first one was about 6 years ago. It was a hoop earring and went clean through the lobe, hit the brick, bounced onto the door. Like, it was that forceful.
I'm not sure, but I feel like I felt something like touch my hair when I was in the surgery, like a little light wind across my hair, but there's no wind down here. It was right when he was talking about women's earrings getting ripped out, so that didn't make me incredibly happy. Still have my earrings on, but yeah, that was weird. It was weird. I can honestly say I think this was the most haunted house I've ever been inside, and there's a whole extended video of all of my experiences and the full tour if you want to find that on the channel for a more in-depth look. The Sorrel Weed House is open to the public year-round, and visitors can participate in historical, architectural, and paranormal tours. I would love to hear your experiences, so please leave them in the comments below. Another stop on Savannah's haunted hit list, this is the Marshall House. It's the oldest Savannah hotel still in existence, built in 1851 by Mary Marshall, the godmother of Savannah. All right, we're walking in. They've got the big pineapple down on the floor there. That's a symbol of Southern hospitality. Fun fact, this portrait of Mary Marshall was acquired from the estate of Jim Williams, the infamous antique dealer who inspired the John Brent novel Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil. If you're a fan, I'll also post another video about the haunted filming locations from the movie. But for now, we're checking in to the Marshall House. During the Civil War, the hotel was commandeered by Union soldiers and used as a field hospital. Medicine being what it was at those times, they conducted quite a few amputations. I am sensing an unsettling pattern here. Definitely got the trademark creaky floors of an old hotel. Looks like a beautiful view of the parking garage. The floors are definitely old and uneven here. Look at this. Door gap. After the war, the building converted back into a hotel, and by 1899 had electric lights and hot and cold running water. But flash forward 100 years, and during a renovation, they found something truly ghastly beneath the floorboards. They uncovered dozens of skeletal remains, not full skeletons, but a gruesome assortment of hands, feet, and limbs. Renovations were halted, and the Marshall House became a crime scene. Quickly, however, they dated the remains to the Civil War. It was discovered that in the winter of 1864, Savannah had a particularly harsh cold spell. The earth became so hard that the hospital staff could not break ground to dig graves, so the amputated limbs were then buried beneath the floorboards and forgotten to time. They say on occasion, a one-armed Union soldier has been seen wandering through the lobby, carrying his amputated arm. So there are a number of other spirits associated with this hotel, but this is where we'll be staying for the night, so we'll come back to them. For now, let's keep exploring Savannah.
So, towards the end of the Civil War in 1864, Sherman began his infamous March to the Sea. He began by burning down Atlanta and then making his way with 62,000 troops, burning everything in its wake.
As the legend goes, when General Sherman entered Savannah, he was so captivated by its beauty that he spared her. He then gave Savannah to President Lincoln as a Christmas present.
He sends message to Lincoln saying that I beg to gift you the city of Savannah with 150 heavy guns, plenty of ammunition, and 25,000 bales of cotton.
All right. And so that would have been the same winter then that the Marshall House was converted into a field hospital.
Yes, this would be the same winter. Oddly enough, it's cold while we are currently here.
Yeah.
So
I don't think we could bury body parts right now.
no, you could not dig up the ground. The Union soldiers spent Christmas in the city, then marched north. Sherman resumed his tactic of scorched earth and burned a path through South Carolina. Only 80 days after Savannah's occupation, General Robert E. Lee surrendered.
During the Reconstruction, Savannah's free slaves built a thriving community with its own churches and schools, and for a few more decades, cotton remained king. At the time, most of the world's cotton prices were set here, in this building, the Savannah Cotton Exchange. Back in 1794, the cotton gin was invented on a plantation outside the city, and money poured in. Savannah even rivaled Charleston as the region's leading commercial port. Nearby, you'll find the Factors Walk. Factors were the men who set the prices for cotton worldwide, nowadays filled with restaurants, shops, and serial killer museums. It's been one of the busiest areas of the city for centuries, and parts of it still look very much like they did hundreds of years ago. But I hear it's pretty creepy at night. These sealed-off tunnels once led into the basements of buildings located on nearby Bay Street. Their original purpose is a matter of speculation. One theory is that the tunnels were used to transport the enslaved from the river to the city's auction blocks. It's quite possible these tunnels harbor some dark residual energy. In the dead of night, some have claimed to hear moans echoing from deep within. What, you can't get enough of creepy, hidden, sealed-off basement tunnels? Well, then Savannah is the perfect place for you. This is one of the oldest structures in Savannah. This house turned tavern turned restaurant in 1953 is known as the Pirates House. It's a very popular tourist destination, and the oldest part of the building dates back to 1754. By the 1800s, this place was a buzzing tavern with rooms above rented to sailors who worked along the Savannah River. Murders, fights, brawls, you name it, the Pirates House has seen it. In 1962, during renovations, they uncovered a hidden brick tunnel running beneath the house to the river. Again, like the other mysterious tunnels at the Factors Walk, no one's completely sure of its original purpose, but it's been theorized that this tunnel was likely used by dirty, rotten scalawags for nefarious purposes, such as kidnapping drunk sailors. Many a man walked into the bar and woke up hours later on a ship a few hundred miles offshore, given no choice but to work or be thrown overboard. Now sealed off for safety, employees claim when the restaurant's empty, they sometimes hear strange noises, screams, and moans coming from the tunnels. A Captain Flint-like pirate has also been spotted in the upper rooms, cursing, laughing, and once even ordered someone to get him more rum. Get me more rum. I gotta say, that's my kind of ghost. So we're walking back to the Marshall House and the streetlights glowing up against the live oaks and Spanish moss. It's really beautifully eerie. And everywhere I turn, I see a ghost tour. There's walking tours, a trolley, an open-aired hearse. You can go on a haunted pub crawl. And even this movie theater will let you come in at night and ghost hunt. Savannah gets me. And now we're approaching the Marshall House, and as you can see, the ghost tour groups are lined up across the street. Let's hear what one of the guides has to say about this place.
So the Marshall House actually served as an infirmary during the Civil War. And of course, this was before a lot of the modern medical techniques. So a lot of times if you had things like gangrene or infections, off the limb goes, and they would have these chutes in the Marshall House that they would just drop limbs down and, yes, sometimes even bodies. down these chutes. It was said back in the day that the stench coming from the Marshall House was so bad you could smell it almost a mile away, and it really put off a lot of people from coming downtown for that very reason during the Civil War. So, of course, with that history, the Marshall House does have plenty of rumors of people seeing soldiers. Oftentimes they'll hear cries in the nights of people screaming in pain. People think that that's people getting their arms severed off because that's what they had to do if you had an infection at the time. But beyond that, the Marshall House, in my opinion, the most beautiful, well-preserved historical hotel here in Savannah. So even if you're not into the ghostly stuff, check it out. It's a very, very, very pretty hotel.
What do you think? Is this hotel haunted?
I can say yeah. I haven't had any experiences. I've heard a lot of stories,
Yeah.
but I haven't experienced it for myself yet.
Yeah, I see all the tours out there. Oh yeah, how weird. That's quartz. Some believe that quartz can deflect negative energy. So I'm curious if this was an intentional choice on the hotel's part, or they just thought it looked cool. I look like a hobo. It shouldn't be this cold in Savannah this time of the year. It's like 22 degrees out tonight. We're here in January. It's an Arctic chill. So, got like 17 layers on. All right, let's gear up and do some ghost hunting. Wow, look at this. I just opened the compass and it's already behaving really erratically. It might be an interesting night. I like using the compass because it's an older, simpler ghost hunting technology that the spirits are likely more familiar with. Keep an eye out for unusual needle movement, and you may be picking up some unseen energy. So I was just sitting here on the stairs between the 3rd and 4th floors, and I wasn't recording. I was looking down at the needle, and it was completely still, and then did this big half spin twice, and then stopped. I've never seen it do that before. I'm trying to record it now. It's not doing it again, but it did. I got a really weird needle hit on the staircase. So I'll pause here a minute to explain what you're about to hear. In this next segment, where I was recording walking down those same stairs, we got a super weird audio loop where what I'm saying does not match the video at all. Check it out. And it continues on like that for over a minute.
The previous take we just did had a very, very strange audio loop that was nothing near the dialogue that she was recording. So, a little weird.
So here's take 2. So we're back at the Marshall House, and I dare you to find a hotel in the city that doesn't claim to be haunted, but this place has a whole smorgasbord of paranormal activity claims. So let's go have a look. Besides the one-armed apparition of a soldier in the lobby, guests have reported a putrid smell, like rotting flesh. It happens in 3 particular rooms, 214, 314, and 414. They say the cleaning staff is known to play gospel music to ward off the negative vibes. Others have been touched on their wrists in the night, like a ghost is perhaps checking their pulse. Rattling doorknobs, inexplicably locked bathrooms, faucets turned on and off, toilets overflowing, and loud crashes in the night on the 4th floor. My floor. Okay, so we're kind of just going floor by floor here, seeing if we get any interesting hits on the needle. It's around 11:30 at night. We're speaking in hushed tones because obviously this is a fully operational hotel and we don't want to be disrespectful and annoy any of the guests here. not getting any more significant hits. It seems like all the activity has calmed down at this point, so maybe it's time to tuck in for the night.
So we got Savannah. This is us here, Marshall House. Okay. Here's Colonial Park Cemetery. Various squares we've been to.
All right, good night, Brett. Good luck. Brett's down on the second floor and I'm up on the fourth, so that gives us a pretty good spread to see if we can catch any paranormal activity tonight. All day, anyone I talked to in town, when I told them I was staying at the Marshall House, I got a big reaction. People were like, "Oh, you're staying in that hotel. Oh, you're brave. Oh, woo, very haunted." And then I talked to the staff here, and they all claim, they've heard the stories, but none of them have had any personal experiences. So you kind of have apples and oranges here. I will say, besides all the reports of the ghostly soldiers and things, there are some stories of ghost children here, and ghost children freak me out more than anything. No one's totally sure who these children are. At some point, this place was an orphanage for kids who had been displaced from one of the great fires. There also was a young kitchen girl that died in the early 1900s, again in a fire, I think in the kitchen of the hotel. So it could be any of those things. Maybe it's some kind of a residual haunting from that traumatic energy, but there's a couple of really terrifying stories. There's this one woman who claimed that her son was in the bathroom and she heard him talking, and she assumed, he's young, he's playing with an imaginary friend, and then suddenly he started to scream, and she runs into the bathroom to check on him, and he has this bright red bite mark on his arm, and it's like little tiny teeth, like another ghost child has bit him on the arm. Yeah, I'm not looking for that to happen tonight. Definitely not here to be bitten by ghost children. Getting the gear all set up for the night here. I'm going to put up this night vision camera. Let's do one last compass reading. Looks quiet at the moment. Also put out the spirit bell here if the spirits want to make their presence known and terrify me in the middle of the night. They can ring the bell. So I scrubbed through all the night footage, and I picked up this one really interesting sound around 2 a.m. That's crazy. I do remember kind of waking up, but I didn't really register what the sound was. But this sound definitely woke me up. And it continued through the entire night. Good morning. Had a little trouble sleeping, not because of the ghost, but because the heating system in this room was like crazy loud. I guess they probably don't need to use heat in Savannah very often, but as I mentioned, we're here during an Arctic chill. So, yay. Alright, I'm checking out. The heater was blasting and whistling all through the night, but still got some really interesting, hits on the compass, and learned some fascinating stories about this place and its history. So I definitely still recommend coming and exploring the Marshall House on your own, and let me know if you experience anything. So we're enjoying our complimentary breakfast before we leave. Brett says that his night was uneventful, so 4th floor for the win. This last stop on the tour is a little outside of town, so we hopped in a lift. Welcome to Bonaventure Cemetery, the final stop on our tour. is utterly beguiling here. I can see why it's one of the most photographed cemeteries in the world. The cemetery was founded in 1846. Before that, it was a plantation. As the legend goes, one night there was a spectacular party going on when a butler came to inform the owner that the roof had caught fire. Rather than panic, the host moved the party out to the garden where they proceeded to make merry. They toasted the house as it burned to the ground and then threw their crystal glasses against the oak trees. John Barrett recounted the tale in Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil, stating, "Tradition has it that if you listen closely on quiet nights, you can still hear the laughter and the shattering of crystal." So this cemetery is enormous. It's over 160 acres. They offer a lot of driving tours, but I just really prefer to walk. It's so beautiful. There are some really wild names. We just passed a Kraken grave. You know, psychologists say if you want to live a happier life, you should contemplate death. And I can't imagine a more beautiful place to stroll around on a Sunday and contemplate mortality. This was my first trip to Savannah, and I'm obsessed. I love it here. This is a town built for ghost tours, built for the ghost tourists. I barely scratched the surface of the stories to be told here. I will be coming back. Hey, if you enjoyed the episode, please consider joining my Patreon community. For only $5 a month, you can support the channel's growth and get all kinds of exclusive bonus content like episode-inspired cocktail recipes and travel itineraries, so you can follow in my footsteps, if you dare. Find me on Patreon. I'll see you next time.
I fear, my dear, a ghost has slipped into my world.